Right, okay. So I'm going to repeat that. So, alhamdulillah, I've got immense pleasure in introducing Dr. Rahat Iram, who is going to be talking about the management of diabetes through her own personal experience, but from a very different angle, using micronutrients. As she's already mentioned, you know, there's a lot of work in the literature on the management using, hold on, I'm going to mute everybody, using herbal remedies, using lifestyle changes, and obviously using conventional medication. But I think it will definitely be really interesting to hear Rahat's insights into the management using micronutrients. So I'm going to hand over to her, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Feroz, for introducing me. And thank you very much for all the people for joining here and for taking interest in this particular type of diabetic management. I call it micromanagement of diabetes because it's like Dr. Feroz just mentioned, it's not about pharmaceutical or herbal or any other particular type of management. It's solely based upon micronutrients. And that's why I'm calling it micromanagement of this mega disease. So let's get started. And it goes without saying that it's purely an educational session, and I'm not guiding anyone about the treatments here. So be careful about these things, because even micronutrients can go wrong. Unless you really know how to use them, please do not try them. Since this is a huge topic and most of us are coming from a background where we have no idea about a lot of micronutrients, even the macronutrients, we are not really taught a good biochemistry about, let's say, carbohydrate metabolism, which is one of the basic problems in diabetes. So without that knowledge, it becomes really huge topic. And I realized once I started working on it, that it's not possible to finish it all in one small session. It will be really funny story otherwise, you know, nothing more than that. So if we want to gain something out of it, practical and important, which can we apply with safety, we really need to first learn about it. So my aim today is to utilize this time in the best possible way. So each one of you, whether you're a patient, a medical student, or just a lay person, everyone with any issue, they should get at least some information out of it. So in part one, I'm gonna stick with the most general part. I will give a brief history about my diabetic journey, and then we're gonna first learn about the underlying mechanism, underlying cause behind diabetes, which I'm sure pretty much all of you know is the insulin resistance, which is also not just for diabetes. I mean, it's practically behind so many metabolic problems. Metabolic syndrome or PCOD, even the weight gain issue, people are not able to lose weight despite all the efforts. And the underlying reason is insulin resistance. So we need to learn why we develop insulin resistance, and then we're gonna look for the solution in the light of evidence-based medicine. We're gonna touch base on a lot of epigenetic factors which causes insulin resistance, and how we're going to combat those things to improve and even possibly reverse the most dreaded complications of diabetes. Hopefully we'll have some time about Q&A at the end. And later on, at least for 2 or 3 or maybe even more parts, depending on your level of interest, we can go in further details. And I will particularly would love to have some other physician members who can actually make a difference in their difference by putting all this information to work, because I'm not a treating physician at this time, and most of the information is just with just a few number of people, right? So N size need to be increased, and together we can make a difference, inshallah. So let's start. Once upon a diabetes, my story actually is about 2 decades long. In 2000, I was diagnosed, but before that, I just want to mention a few things, starting from my childhood. And there is an importance behind each and every word that I have written very carefully. And inshallah, as we go along this presentation, I will explain why these things were important And if we could detect these things, pick up on these clues, these are the body clues, right? So if we can pick them up and treat them in earlier, the person may be saved from this lifelong misery of diabetes. That's how I would call it. So my childhood was very much so remarkable for a lot of allergies, particularly allergic rhinitis, nasal congestion, very severe constipation, which I would go only once a week, believe it or not. And off and on, I would have urticaria, which would last at least for months. It required a lot of antibiotics with all those tonsillitis. I had to even take steroids at time due to urticaria, and I ended up having tonsillectomy done. But things did not really much improve. Back in 90s when I was in medical college, I again had a lot of issues going. It increased as I started having burning feet, and I have repeated UTI, occasional DUBs, and polydipsia was also a very prominent feature. So during those 5 years of med school, I had my OGTT, the oral glucose tolerance test, done 3 times. And every time it was either negative or borderline without having a clear diagnosis to work with. I was not very obese. My BMI was around 24, but yes, I was not very slim either. My diagnosis actually the diagnosis came as a gestational diabetes, which was after 3rd miscarriage. And my A1C at that time was quite high. If I remember correctly, it was 18.9, which is quite unheard of. So right away, I was put on insulin and metformin. Now I started gaining a little bit more weight than usual, and my BMI um, spiked up to 26 with cyclic weight gain around the period's time. I did everything religiously. I was seeing the top of the line physician, the endocrinologist, and I did everything. I worked out every single day. But was it helpful? I don't know. It might have, but apparently no. It wasn't helpful for diabetic control. It wasn't helpful for losing weight, which I desperately wanted. Anyway, within 3 years of being diagnosed, I started having early onset macular degeneration. The problem was intense enough that I was put on every 3-month every 3-month ophthalmologist visit, and they will run a battery of tests, and just to make sure that it's not advancing very quickly. There was a risk of blindness, and I also have mild diabetic retinopathy developed. Not to mention that my neuropathies in arms and limbs was pretty high at that time. Then I started my pathology residency, and things really became quite worse very quickly, which looking back now, I realized was because of the exposure to formaldehyde 24/7 that I was inhaling. And that has a major role, which inshallah we will discuss when we talk about the genetics. My sickness was extreme enough that I had to quit my residency just when it was only 1 more year to go. So we decided to move because there was no fresh fruit and vegetable available on the island where we were living. And we moved to BC in thinking this is an agricultural land. And this was when I started looking into the nutrition. And things started improving from there. Whatever I would learn, I tried to apply. And I must mention that I had really gone through a lot of testing with no help at all. I was sick enough that I would vomit right away after eating. I had a lot of visual issues, so I was not looking at anything under the microscope. I could not see much clear. It was always looking through a foggy curtain. So things were very blurry all the time. I've had difficulty walking, and I was given a diagnosis of probable MS. And everything was blamed. Maybe it's because of the diabetic complications. But I don't think it was. and I will prove it as we go along. So eventually, when I started working on my nutrition, I realized that very quickly I was able to reduce the dose of insulin because I was getting very much, so many episodes of hypoglycemia. And finally, I decided I'm going to just get off it because my life was so limited. I wasn't able to go outside the home for more than 2 hours without thinking about food and caring about the water to carry with me all the time. This was a very limiting factor for the lifestyle I wanted to have, and I was not able to. Once I managed at my own and got off the insulin, but my A1C was, of course, which initially reduced, but hyperglycemia was still there. So with the help of another endocrinologist, now I switched to Victoza, which is a GLP-1 agonist. And during the 2 years, we went over too many medications, basically from DPP-4 inhibitors or GLP-1 agonist. GLP-1 agonists were more suitable for me as compared to anything else that I tried, which gave me a lot of side effects right away. So I was not able to take them for long. And there was a reason behind all these things, which inshallah we'll discuss later on as well. In 2014, I got my first introduction with the line of treatment, which is called methylation now. So I became interested and I started reading about it. But I was not brave enough to actually just go ahead and apply those information. But a little bit. For last 20 years, I was not able to fast at all. As Muslim, we fast at least during the month of Ramadan. And this was the first time that now I was able to fast. And Alhamdulillah, it was for the whole month. During the month of Ramadan, what I did, the information that I learned from methylation, I picked up a few things and I decided, okay, I'm going to first focus on my liver because my liver enzymes are very high. And I learned more about the magnesium in terms of micronutrient. That was the only nutrient that I was more comfortable now. So I started applying that, but I picked up a very good formulation called Mag SRT. It has tiny doses of active vitamins as well. So that's what I was doing. And lo and behold, within a year, my retinopathy, which was making me go through ophthalmology exam every 3 months, it reversed. And I still remember ophthalmologist was standing there and he was like looking at me and looking at the chart. And he said, I have never experienced such a thing before. So I don't know what you're doing. And as I opened my mouth to inform what I'm happily that, this is what I'm doing. He said, okay, whatever you're doing, just keep doing. And, it's working. And I'm surprised. So I shared that happily in the same group, EBNM, and you can read the story there. And here I want to ask one question. We take metformin. Everyone is put on metformin as the starting point about diabetes, right? So we have to think about what it is that this particular medication depletes. And here on the screen, it's a screenshot of my Tavin website. It's a pretty good, easy to use website. You can just plug in any medication. Like right here, I typed in metformin extended release, and you can see it depletes B12 and folic acid. And one of the complications of diabetes is neuropathy, which I have been experiencing for even before I got diabetes and got diagnosed with diabetes. So what is the cause of diabetic neuropathy? And was metformin helpful, or did it actually put me further down the drain? And what causes retinopathy? Why I had early onset issues within 3 years of being diagnosed. These are the burning questions. We're going to talk about them, but I'm going to give you a brief overview because you must be thinking what exactly I did during that time that reversed my retinopathy. These are all the things I was doing at that time, which included some fresh vitamins in the form of broccoli sprouts on daily basis. I was eating liver because I learned liver has a lot of vitamins that we need, particularly vitamin A and D, and many other things like zinc and copper. And I was also consuming zinc-rich pumpkin seeds, blackstrap molasses, which has a lot of minerals in it as well. And I did the fasting, and I already mentioned in terms of nutrients or supplements, I was not taking much at that time, but even this much helped. What I did focus on, meanwhile, I had my genetic test done, and I knew that, okay, I have certain issues, which I have listed on the right-hand side. And I focused on these particular areas, whatever was needed for them. I took those things, started experimenting with those. And the results were very unexpected for me as well. So after the retinopathy reversed, I became more interested, and I was still studying, but 2016 was a year very helpful for me, as well as it was, it has a different, it tested me on a different level too. One of the things I experienced during that time was a very bad frozen shoulder, repeated UTI, which was actually a non-infective. And I also started having small joints arthritis at that time. It took me a number of months and a lot of tests without much help from the Western Western medicine. Finally, I learned from Dr. Susan Owen. She runs a group on the website, on Facebook too. And she is a main researcher about oxalates. So looking at my genetic test and her information, I realized, okay, this is the oxalate issue, not something else. And I needed to treat that. So whatever I knew at that time, I started applying those things. An interesting thing happened. After the retinopathy, not just the oxalate treatment helped with the oxalate issues, which has a lot of complication beside the one I have mentioned above. Also, one of the other issue is very dry eyes. And so anyway, I have improvement on those things, and my dental cavity also remineralized. And I have shared that whole story on Facebook already. You can go ahead and read over there. So, and this cavity still is remineralized. It's been about 4 years now, right? Or 3 or 4 years. So then on on 25th of October, I ran out of my medication. I was on Victoza at that time, and my physician, endocrinologist, have given me Ozempic too. So I gave the new requisition in, and they said it's going to take a couple of days to have that available. So in those 2 days, I just took a brave step, and I thought, okay, I'm going to apply the things that I learned. And during that time period, I was studying methylation particularly. I was studying the transsulfuration pathway, and I happened to, just one thing led to another, and I stumbled upon some information which made me look into it in more detail. And that was the use of one particular mineral called manganese. So I thought, okay, why not to give it a try? I went ahead and picked up a bottle and I started using it. Usually, I must tell you at this time that even in a normal human being, non-diabetic person, evening times we usually are a little bit more pre-diabetic. Our blood sugar runs a little bit higher during the daytime because of the hormonal setup we have. And maybe that when we are awake, we tend to eat more too. So my blood sugar was always pretty high sometime as 18 to 22 millimole, which would be like 400 or 500 milligram per deciliter, I think. So I will show you the results. I think my slides are a bit mismatched here. So let's think about it. The diabetic complication that I was experiencing, do you think they were all because of hyperglycemia? Because my blood sugar was running high all the time. And that is the most common thing that makes sense. And every doctor says the same. You need to control your blood sugar, and that's why you're having this problem. But when I looked into it, this was not the case. I found many evidence, everything was directing that it's mostly because of the oxidative stress that we develop retinopathy. And one of the review which actually describe all the mechanism, I have shown the screenshot at the bottom of the screen. It describes all the mechanisms, and you can learn a lot about oxidative stress, how our body goes through those things, what causes it, and what we need to do. I think every one of you should read these things. In summary, I took the matter in hand and I started looking into what causes oxidative stress and then what can help. And I found thiamine was one of the main micronutrient, vitamin B1, which actually help reduce oxidative stress. And the funny thing is, thiamine is the major vitamin that we need for carbohydrate metabolism. Each and every step pretty much involve thiamine. And most of the diabetics are deficient in thiamine. That's why, particularly those who are alcoholic or those who are generally feeling fatigued all the time, I think I can bet that they are all just by default thiamine deficient. So why do we become deficient in thiamine? It is one major reason is that our body do not have much stores of thiamine. Secondly, our lifestyle. For example, just drinking one Pepsi every day or relying on fast food for just for 4 days, it can make you thiamine deficient, and quickly you will experience some of the symptoms. The mast cell activation syndrome, the postural hypotension, the postural orthopnea, all those things, the dizziness, the constant fatigue, constant struggle with energy, they are the early sign of thiamine deficiency. And as many of the diabetics also experience those leg cramps, that's also in keeping with the same thing. And we will go into detail so you will know the biochemistry, you will understand why do we get this and how to treat it. Another common thing I want to mention is the chlorinated water. If you're not using filtered water and cooking your food with the tap water, every city puts chlorine in the water. So that chlorine actually deactivates the thiamine. Then there are other thiaminase enzymes in certain foods that actually does not help, particularly I think the egg white, if you are eating raw, if you're not cooking your eggs correctly, that's also an issue. And the rice, people who were always eating the boiled rice and draining out the water, they drain out pretty much all the thiamine there is, and they ended up having congestive heart failure issue, which previously used to be called as beriberi, wet beriberi. And you can look into WHO website. There are some free books available about thiamine. I really encourage you to download and read about that, read that book. You will realize that even in Bangladesh, when they found why a lot of people relying on rice and fish every day, why do they have this congestive heart failure even in adults? And that was the thiamine. So look into those about thiamine. And here is another article which is talking about the most common factors that leads to thiamine deficiency. And magnesium deficiency is one of them. Who is not deficient in magnesium these days? Even our soil is depleted. And this was one of the major lessons that I learned along the way, that even before you take thiamine, you need to take magnesium. You need to increase the magnesium level. Otherwise, you will end up, banging your head in the wall. Reason being, you will take the best type of thiamine, even benfotiamine, but it's not going to work. Then you don't get those results and you become frustrated. And I felt that way too, that either this literature is not right, until I started looking into things differently. And I realized, okay, thiamine does not work if we are magnesium deficient. And I was magnesium deficient. So you have to first do that and make sure you write down or make a note of it, mental note of it, that do not just jump right away on taking thiamine. If you're familiar with it, still make sure that you go stepwise fashion. First thing first, so the other thing will work nicely then. Okay, talking about diabetes, I just want to touch base about its common labs. As our focus, you know, that is always about the blood sugar level. And then we checked some end organ damages, looking for if we are losing protein through our urine, how is the lipid profile coming along. Dyslipidemia is one of the hallmark. And of course, the annual ophthalmology exam, because retinopathy is a major issue. So with all the focus on hyperglycemia, all these labs are directed towards that. Is it really necessary, or is it's just getting a little bit more attention than it deserves? Or maybe there is, I mean, maybe it is important. I'm not saying it's not, but maybe there is something more to it. So let's look into those things. For example, here, beside those common labs, this particular article published in 2014, this described very nicely that there are non-enzymatic glycation reactions that happens in the body. And we generally call them advanced glycation end products, or AGE, right? And the more the AGE is present in our body, we age quickly as well. And the diabetes complication also are more pronounced in those people. There is a lot of literature available on this thing, and please look into that. So what causes this age thing? Why do we have those non-enzymatic glycation going on? We have to, as we will go and we will learn in detail, but I just want to mention that it's B6 deficiency, which is one of the major reasons. And we should learn about this thing, and we should start looking at our patient not as type 1, type 2, and type 3, or adult onset or gestational diabetes, not into these categories, but we should metabolically profile them, because each and every person will be different, and each and every person's requirement will be different. Right now, we are just, billions of people are being treated the same way, and that is just control your diabetes. And we tell everyone just go and lose weight, but they're not able to lose weight. Their blood sugar does not really work. Every single diabetic must have experienced this thing. You take one medication for a few days, you feel good, maybe you last for 1 month, results are good, but in 1 or 2 years, that medication is no more enough, because body now try to normalize its homeostatic mechanism, and that particular medication is now rendered ineffective. Then we add another one, then we add another one, then, so we keep increasing dose or adding the medication, because we are only looking at one aspect, that is the glucose, right? But this particular article here is telling us clearly that we can look at glyoxylate as one of the marker, and this is available. I mean, this lab is available. You can get it done. So this novel biomarker of pre-diabetes, you can actually detect it at least 3 years in advance. So imagine how many people we can save from becoming diabetic if we just look into it. And here is the interesting part, which really excites me. In this particular article, it mentions about certain things goes up. For example, we talked about the glyoxylate, it increases. But in the same people who are down the road going to become diabetic, 3 years in advance, they were able to detect certain deficiencies, certain amino acid profiles also changed. So in amino acids, particularly the glycine, there was lower level of glycine, and there was lower levels of lysophosphatidylcholine and acetylcarnitine. And once we have acetylcarnitine is low in our body, it is produced in our body. I'm not going to go into much biochemistry, at least at this time, but I want to tell you, once you have low carnitine, your energy level goes down. You're always fatigued then. You quickly become tired. Once your glycine is low, it becomes very difficult to maintain your blood sugar level. You will either it's going to be too high or too low. You are always on a roller coaster. And I was lucky enough to have my plasma amino acid level test done, and I realized that, okay, yeah, my glycine is pretty low. And I'm sure the phosphatidylcholine, I did not check it, but I knew from the symptoms that yes, it is quite low, and I started supplementing it at that time too. So the take-home message at this point is we have other biomarkers besides just looking at the blood sugar. And it's very easy to look into those things. Yes, government may not allow those things because these are not part of the guidelines. But if you are interested, if you really want to make a difference in your life or in the life of your patients, then you have to break the rules. I'm sorry, that's how it is. The first thing to actually um, find any improvement is that you have to look beyond the guidelines. You have to kind of ignore them pretty much at every level. Let's look at this screen. You see in the liver, we have the glyoxylate formation, and that comes out as an oxalate, and kidney is supposed to filter it out. I'm just keeping it very simple. One of the enzyme which is uh, involved in this particular glyoxylate formation is called AGT. Here is a more understandable way of looking at things. So glycolate coming from the glucose metabolism, it is converted into glyoxylate. And the AGT enzyme convert it into glycine. Now look at the B6. AGT enzyme is B6 dependent. And if we are deficient in B6, what's going to happen? Of course, glyoxylate going to be high and glycine going to be low. And that's exactly that article was telling us about. Similarly, the glyoxylate also, when it gets high, body is going to try to eliminate it, to take it out. And the route is through the kidney. What happens in the kidney? When we have a lot of oxalates, we form oxalate kidney stones. Our kidney starts, the glomeruli become more, start becoming damaged, and we start losing protein. So microalbuminuria also sets in. So what should we do? Is it really because of hyperglycemia, which is causing all this symptom? Would you a little bit at least disagree from that thing now, if not completely convinced at this time, that we must look into other things? And one of the things is these novel biomarkers, which are telling us about diabetes 3 years in advance. So B6 and diabetes, not conventional medicine physicians, but at least functional medicine physicians are familiar to some extent with this thing that most diabetic are B6 deficient. Either they're not taking a sufficient amount of it, or their body is not absorbing it. Or maybe it's just the demand, because the glyoxylates are produced inside the body. We do need B6 for oxalate metabolism. If we are deficient, if oxalates are high, or we are consuming more high oxalate food, for example, spinach is very high, many green leafy vegetables are very high, and we tend to do that on purpose. I mean, we want to eat more plant-based food, and they are really healthy foods. But if it's causing a load on an already deficient system, then is it a good idea? So do you think the people who are eating, drinking a lot of green smoothies, trying to lose weight or become more healthy by consuming more vegetables in the form of juice or smoothie, is that a good idea? Or very quickly they're going to end up having some kidney issues? The later is actually correct, and you will find a lot of people dealing with oxalate issue, which is not even diagnosed correctly. And I have really struggled with at least 3 different specialists, and none of them was able to diagnose until I started making my own slides, looking at my own tears, saliva, urine, everything under the microscope. And I found oxalate crystals everywhere. So I think even if we have a microscope in our clinics, and we can quickly make a slide and have a look and be familiar how does oxalate crystal look like, then we can at least go on that route and do the further checking. I have shared the oxalate crystal, how they look like, and what were my slides and how pretty they were. As long as I did not know what they are, I was really admiring their beauty. So you can go ahead and look at those at EBNM. So yes, all diabetics are B6 deficient, pretty much all. I cannot generalize. And I also want to point out an important point, which is a clinical pearl. Every diabetic get the liver function enzyme test done, right? It's a regular biomarker that we look at. One of the enzyme transaminases that we look at, they are actually B6 dependent. So if we just look at the ALT level, you can pretty much have a understanding that this person may be dealing with a B6 deficiency. I had the same thing going, but I did not understand at that time. And as a matter of fact, a lot of things that I did not really had a clear understanding. Now I got a better understanding once I was preparing this presentation. What happens is ALT, which is usually a liver enzyme which goes up as the disease advances, most of the people have higher levels. It's only because B6 is only concentrated in liver at that time, but it's not sufficient. And if as it gets more and more depleted, ALT level, unless there is hepatocyte injuries going on, then AST will become high, but ALT is usually low. And I have seen it as low as just 6, although the lab range is less than 35 or less than 55, depending on male or female. But I don't believe in that anymore because 6 is not enough. And I gave vitamin B6 to those patients and they just, came back to life literally. And all these things has been discussed in the group as well. So please go ahead and do a little bit search on B6 post and learn the signs, symptoms, and the different enzymes involved. Um, I'm just mentioning ALT here because this is a commonly available and you can quickly have a idea how it can help us. Okay, so moving along on my story, in 2014, I started a little bit more experimenting with supplements with the help of the methylation studies I was doing. And I also started fasting every year. I did my liver detox and started taking magnesium SRT, as I mentioned earlier, and retinopathy reversed. This is a repeat slide or what? I apologize for that. So I think now I was at oxalate issue, and on 25th October, I took the manganese. Yes, this was a slide it's supposed to be. So ALT is a B6 dependent enzyme, and here you can have a look that my ALT back in 2016 when I was really sick, it was 106. And in 2007, 8, 9, I don't have those records available. At one time, my ALT level was more than 200. I had no idea why it was, but I didn't know what to do. And then we came here and started eating a better nutrient-rich diet, and my ALT decreased to 29, then went up back to 95, and it stayed up there for a number of years until I started working on the liver and provided it with the required nutrients. I did check my B6 level, but this was after a lot of supplementation. And even after the supplementation, it was 63, which is kind of in the middle of the range. So ideally, anything which is helpful for the body, you should aim for upper range. If you divide your lab range into 3, aim for the upper 1/3, not in the lower 1/3. And how many times we see B12 is a commonly checked vitamin, right? And the range is just hilariously high. It's range from 200 to 800. So everyone is fine as long as it's within the range. That's not true. And that's one of the major issue that we are just relying on the reference range without understanding the need. And it's not the same. I have discussed this topic quite in detail, so please look at those posts and understand why it is so. I also want to tell you that our protein metabolism is completely B6 dependent, or at least mostly B6 dependent. So if we are B6 dependent every single day of our life and we are deficient, not just the carbohydrate metabolism, but the B6, but protein metabolism also get affected. And if protein and carbs are not working properly, particularly the carbohydrate metabolism, essential fatty acid metabolism is going to get affected. And I think it is also one of the earliest mechanism. We will discuss this thing in maybe part 3. One also mentioned that now that you know about B6 deficiency, please be cautious. B6 is not a benign vitamin. It can cause toxicity. It can damage your small nerve fibers and cause small nerve fiber neuropathy, which means your whole body can be literally on fire 24/7. That's how it feels. A lot of people are B6 toxic, and they think, even those who are not taking supplements, they think that this is because they may be consuming more B6 rich food, so they start avoiding those nutrient rich food, which is totally wrong treatment. It is a huge topic, but inshallah we will discuss if more people are interested in this thing. But right now I just want to tell you, please do not supplement at your own. You have to be under, first you need to be properly evaluated for the need. If you are, for example, deficient in certain amino acids and you start taking B6, within months you can become toxic. So that's why I checked mine out, because I was supplementing and I wanted to make sure that it doesn't go above the range and I do whatever I need to do. So by now, as this particular article, and I have given the PMID number here, is saying that chronic hyperglycemia, it promotes the advanced age glycation end products. Do you really think that's the case? Or should we really look for the other things? And is it that this critical goal of preventing the chronic hyperglycemia, that's the only goal we all endocrinologists have, and every single diabetic is told to just control the glycemia? Is it really helping anyone? Or we are still having all those diabetic complications anyway? I have seen a patient, I still remember him. He was so meticulous in his work. He used to check his blood sugar 3 times after every meal, and he kept a record. He has a register of it. He was handwriting everything and kept it with him all the time. And still he had such bad diabetic complications at a very young age. And I did not know at that time. This was during one of my rotation during residency. So I don't really believe. And that's why I started investing a little bit in my glucose testing. I picked up a continuous glucose monitoring device called Freestyle Libre, which is available in Canada, in UK and other countries, maybe a little bit different. I think Dexcom is another one. So I have this CGM. I applied it on my arm and it checks the blood sugar every single minute, but you have to, it's a flash meter. So you have to check it using a meter or your phone. This is earlier when I was on Victoza and metformin, this is how my blood sugar was. Despite being on these expensive medication, this blood sugar was all over the place, and it was going high as 18 in most of the days, right? And hardly ever it was below 8.6, very limited amount. My blood sugar control was still not great at all. This is from the day I first started experimenting with the manganese. And as you can see, at around 6 o'clock, my blood sugar was really low. Usually that's the time when my blood sugar was very high. And I'm like, okay, what's happened? I was not feeling well, so I checked my blood sugar and it was 3. I did the finger prick, it was really low. So I became, rather than becoming frightening, I took it as a hope. And I thought, okay, minerals can work and I should keep moving in that direction. So I picked up my medication, which came to the pharmacy after 2-3 days, but I never took them. And they're still in my fridge. And I never needed to use them, alhamdulillah. So this is after, in 1 month of when I started using the minerals. I didn't know much about them. I was cautious, but even little bit made a huge difference. And in 1 month, you can see in December, my median blood sugar was around 6 to 7, and it was not going as high as 18. Now the postprandial blood sugar was maximum going up as high as 12. And remember, my diet was literally the same as I was eating before. And all other different timings of the day, the blood sugar started improving. In 1 month, here is a very nice graph actually. So previously, when I started in November 17, my blood sugar was postprandially going above 15 or 16. Now, December 17, in 1 month, it was not going more than 9 or 10, not even 12, right? There were days like that. Maximum, if it goes, it was as high as 12. So this was the early when I was on Victoza and metformin. And in 1 year time, this is how it shrank. It came down, the median was around 7 or 8. No, it is not an ideal situation. I still had postprandial hyperglycemia, but it was much better than what I was having with when I was using this Victoza, right? It was all over the place. So Ozempic, I did not really give much try because I took it for 1 month and it made me quite sick, and I stopped that too. Okay, so by now, here is a summary, whatever I did at that time. So if your main interest is to find out what I did, here is a list of every single thing that I took. How, at what stage I started taking them and how much I took it, what happened. These are the long story, but here is the summary. So I did the fasting, vitamin A, pretty much all vitamin Bs, D and K were important. I addressed superoxidase mutase enzyme. I took digestive enzyme and stomach acid as well. I addressed the liver detoxification. And in herbs, I took fenugreek seeds. I have discussed in huge detail. There are so many posts about that in the EBNM group. So please go over that, learn how to use that. It's one of the golden spice that you must not miss out if you're dealing with any type of insulin resistance. I did take moringa seeds as well, not the moringa leaf, but the seeds. I took flaxseed, and in supplements on the right-hand side, I have mentioned some minerals as well as amino acids, which included taurine, lysine, and glycine. And particularly manganese and chromium, zinc, and magnesium were the main minerals. So this was a brief story. If this was your aim, you already got the information. But if you are interested in learning more, I think we can only learn if we first understand what the problem is, where the problem is, how the problem is developing. Only then we can find the solution. Would you agree to that? Right? So those of you who are interested, I'm going to go on about this thing. It may be very basic for some, but please stay with me and tolerate some basic stuff too. So for hyperglycemia, a lot of things matters. We know it blood sugar is increased with food, but then there are timing as well. We are supposed to check our blood sugar as the fasting as well as the postprandial. After eating a meal is called postprandial. And in general, the diurnal changes, the circadian rhythm, the effect of hormone also increases our blood sugar level at a certain time of the day. Then there is insulin response to it, which will determine if our blood sugar remains high or low. And we're going to look into these things a little bit more. So starting from the macronutrients like carbohydrate, protein, and fat, we know every time we eat any of these food, the body tend to have a certain level of blood sugar in response to that type of food. It goes highest with the carbohydrates, and then protein also. The next is protein, but when we eat fat, blood sugar does not really increase that much. So we must remember that the type of food we eat is going to determine. Usually we do not eat just one type of food. Usually it's a mix. We have all of them. And there is a reason, there is an importance of it. We'll talk about that. But let's look at the time. Every time any type of food you eat, the blood sugar will go up, but certain food, blood sugar go up very quickly, and with other, it may take some time to develop, and that's a more flattened type of curve as compared to a sharp spike. And this is the basis of glycemic index, like how quickly your blood sugar rises, and the glycemic load, like how much carbohydrate were there, which quickly will increase your blood sugar level. So, and when we are guiding our patient, we are always talking about low glycemic index food. We will discuss those in a few minutes. But right now, just pay attention that carbohydrate increases the blood sugar the maximum, protein the next, and fat takes a lot of time, and the curve is really flat. So fat is not really your enemy. We are so much afraid. People still are eating fat-free food, and they think if they consumed even one egg, oh, their cholesterol going to go up. We think that eating any fat is the only cause of high cholesterol. This is absolutely totally wrong. And back in 2012, even government agreed, and they published that we were wrong about the fat-free diet. This is not the reason for cholesterol. And cholesterol is not your enemy either. We need that. Every single cell of our body needs that. And the problem we are dealing with is at cellular level, is not at anything else. So when is that important? Can we really say that we're gonna take the fat out, knowing that fat is not increasing the blood sugar, it's not causing the cholesterol, high cholesterol level, it's not causing any other issue. So we have to change our way we perceive the fat. We have, and only thing, the only way to do that is by learning. So you're no more afraid, and you're no more taking any feed from the media. So what time do you check your blood sugar becomes important, because it depends what type of food you have eaten. If you have eaten a fatty meal and you check your blood sugar at 1 hour postprandial, and then you think my blood sugar is not really that high today, that's good. But maybe it is high because at 3 hour postprandial, not at 1 hour. So type of food is really important. Timing is also very important. Ideally, when you start working on these things, you will have to check your blood sugar 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour, or even better, if you can afford, invest into a continuous glucose monitoring device. So you can really learn how it affects your body with any given food at any time. Okay, so after macronutrients and their timings, let's look at the insulin, because it's all the game of insulin. Just like the blood sugar goes up, every time blood sugar goes up, our body also produces insulin in relation to that. So all those macronutrients, when they increase blood sugar, the response of insulin secretion is usually proportional to that. So just like carbohydrate causes more blood sugar, they also cause high level of insulin in our body. Protein is the next, and fat is the least. So having sufficient insulin in response to carbohydrate should, bring it back to normal. But we are still not able to have a good glycemic control. Why? We have sufficient insulin. As many of you know, that many diabetic, rather most type 2 diabetic, are actually high in insulin. They are not deficient in insulin. That is for type 1 diabetic, whose beta cells, the insulin producing cells in the pancreas, they may be deficient or destroyed by certain autoimmune mechanism. The problem in type 2 diabetics, or anyone who is developing insulin resistance, like those struggling with the weight or have PCOD, the problem is at the cellular level that insulin is resistant. There are certain, it's like considered as a lock and key mechanism. So insulin is supposed to open that door so that blood sugar, the glucose, can go inside the cell and get metabolized. Now that insulin is not able to open that lock, the body try to keep producing more and more and more. So actually there is more insulin in the blood, but the resistance at cellular level, the receptors, they are resistant to it. And that's why the door is not opening, and the blood sugar is not going inside the cell, it's still in the blood. So that's why hyperglycemia. I think this is the very simplified form of explaining for general people. I hope that helps. So what happens when we have this insulin resistance developed and sugar is not going inside the cell, we tend to have a roller coaster of insulin and hyperglycemia. And this is very draining. And when this goes on and on, people become more fatigued and they become insulin resistant. Insulin resistance result in obesity, and that obesity, it's a vicious circle. They promote each other, and they end up having a lot of and organ damages, many diseases, um, particularly the cardiac problems, dyslipidemia, hypertension, even the gallbladder disease, which is one of the very common issue, but we never relate it to diabetes. But from now onward, you are going to think about these things, that anything that's happening in one person, everything is linked. And we cannot blame everything on just hyperglycemia. There is more to it. And once we correct the underlying mechanism, everything will become normalized automatically. Like you looked at some of the things in my own diabetic journey, right? So from cancer to just simple diabetes, everything is linked. And as previously shared, B6 is one of the key here. So this insulin resistance, which is causing all these problems, let's look at it, like, how it happens and what we can do. One of the reason is that insulin is anabolic hormone. That's why anabolic means it is going to make you fat. It is going to promote your metabolism in a positive way where you gain weight. And the function of insulin is that it inhibits lipolysis. So when we have more insulin, we can't really lose the fat, right? It also inhibits ketogenesis. You know how important ketones are. So if we are not able to go into ketogenesis and you're doing all the things, even fasting or dieting, and it's not working out, there is a reason. And that reason may be that your insulin level is high. I think someone's mic is on, so kindly look at that because it's causing a little bit disturbance. So the foods which promote more insulin release, which we previously saw that carbohydrate release more insulin in response to the type of food. Those are the food which are going to make us more fat, right? So when we have more insulin, we're gonna store more fat as well, because that's the normal function. Another thing to remember, to learn and really remember it, every time we eat any food which causes a sudden spike in blood sugar, and in response, body produces insulin, more and more insulin. Even in the presence of insulin resistance, or if you're taking exogenous insulin, like insulin injections, what is going to happen? That high blood sugar is suddenly going to fall down. And this is now you end up having a hypoglycemia. This hypoglycemia is like very dangerous for the body. It's actually more dangerous than the hyperglycemia. And it's generally known as glucose crash. This is when you suddenly feel jittery, hungry, maybe very feverish, sweat a lot, and you feel like just eating something right away, even if it's like the next person sitting to you. Just joking. So anyway, hypoglycemia or this glucose crash is really bad. It really literally feel like you are hit by a truck. And I'm sure many of you have experienced or been told by your patients, and it does not go away unless you sleep. Why? This is a very common thing you will hear from diabetics, especially those who are on insulin. This is because hypoglycemia literally affects the brain, and it damages it far more than hyperglycemia. And when we sleep, we have certain hormones produced. We release cortisol early in the morning. We release growth hormone even at dawn time. And those are the fixed timings that they're going to be released in general. So that's why when we have a good night's sleep, the hypoglycemia effect, it only then you feel better. Otherwise, it's a very bad feeling. It really breaks you down. And I have experienced so many of them Despite being doctor myself, I didn't know how to deal with those things. I was struggling on daily basis with these things. So I hope now you will not. And another point I just want to mention to non-medical people, that if you are on insulin, or if you experience when you make your dietary modification and your insulin start going down, sorry, your blood sugar start going down, you may experience glucose crash. So if you have a hypoglycemia, you should not take your insulin or your anti-diabetic medication for next 24 hours. Let your body recuperate. Let your body repair itself with a good night's sleep. Do not take. One day of hyperglycemia is not going to do any harm, but hypoglycemia can actually kill. So this particular roller coaster of high blood sugar, high insulin level, increasing the weight gain, it's all the game about insulin resistance, and we have to tackle that. So I hope by now you understand that how the problem developed, what the problem is, and now we're going to look at how it developed. So just a key point here, every time we eat food, what type of food we ate, no matter what type of food we eat, there is some release of insulin in the body. And we know the insulin is anabolic, it's going to make you gain weight. So is snacking a good idea? Should we keep eating every 2 hours? As we generally advise people who are going through hypoglycemia, including myself, I was doing that and life was very miserable. I do not agree with it anymore. I think we should not snack, rather keep as much in fasting state as possible, and only eat a moderate amount of food at one time on particular times. Like you can have 1 or 2 meals a day. I take 2 meals a day, and that works out very nicely for me. Any snacking, even if it's just a tiny bit, one blueberry in your mouth, it is still going to release insulin. At this time, also want to remind about golden rule of 1/3, which is a sunnah, that we should only fill our stomach with 1/3 of water, 1/3 of food, and that is sufficient for one time. It does not cause a lot of hyperglycemia, and it prevents a lot of diseases too. Never fill your stomach. There is food available, you can always eat it again. So let's spend a little bit more time looking at different type of foods and what type of blood sugar level they cause in the body. The liquid type of sugar is the one which causes the highest amount of blood sugar. So all the fruit juices, is that a good idea for diabetics, or even in general for people? It does not have any fiber in it, right? And that's why we give that fruit juice to any person with hypoglycemia, because it's really going to spike the blood sugar. Then comes the starchy foods, then milk, then protein and oils. So keep these things in mind. When it comes to the carbohydrate, it's mostly the simple carbohydrate that increases more blood sugar, as you can see from this graph. And that's why we know that, okay, if we keep increasing the insulin and blood sugar, it is going to cause insulin resistance, right? So we make this flow diagram and we added refined carbohydrate as one of the culprit, which is causing insulin, contributing to insulin resistance. Next was the protein. So what type of protein? Animal or the fat protein? Yes, we do have protein in different vegetables and plants and lentils and grains. It's not just the meat, it's the protein. If you do not know this thing, please read about this information. This particular study explained which type of protein causes more insulin resistance, and that is the animal protein. So people who are mostly eating animal protein and their ratio between animal and plant-based protein is off or low, or maybe high, I don't know. Like if animal protein is high, then chances of developing insulin resistance is more. So diabetic, if you are eating a lot of protein at one time, it's not a good idea, right? So we're going to add a lot of animal protein as one of the factor for insulin resistance. Then next factor is the sugar. And as many of you already know, that as our sugar consumption went up over the years, the diabetes and obesity also went up. Particularly fructose, not just the glucose, but the fructose was the culprit. Fructose comes as natural as well as some other man-made sources of it as well, or the extracts. And fructose causes more blood sugar rise than blood sugar. High fructose corn syrup is present in a lot of products. You have to read the label. It's sometimes mentioned as HFCS, sometimes as corn sugar, and it has many other names. Get yourself familiarized. By default, anything that comes in a package, in a pre-packaged bottle, jar, or container, chances are it has high fructose corn syrup. Yes, your ketchup also have a lot of it. So this high fructose corn syrup, all these products have that, and the only way to deal with that is not to use them, right? So fructose causes hyperinsulinemia even far more than glucose. And we're going to add that to our, have a good game. We're going to add that to our chart here. Let's talk about the stress. Stress, we are all familiar, it releases cortisol. Cortisol is known as a stress hormone. So stress is everywhere in the life, and this is how it affects our body. Even normally when we are not stressed, our body does produce cortisol in response to hypoglycemia. So anytime we have a spike of blood sugar followed by insulin release, followed by suddenly low blood sugar, now our body feel uncomfortable. And this is a very key point to remember. This is the time when body release cortisol so that our blood sugar goes back to the range where body is used to, not hypoglycemia by definition. For example, when we read the medical book, they say, okay, anytime blood sugar is below 3.9, we should consider it as hypoglycemia. But believe it or not, if you are a chronic diabetic or dealing with chronic hyperglycemia, for you, the level of hypoglycemia where you're going to experience hypoglycemic symptoms may not be 3 or 4 or even 5. It could be as high as 7 or 10. If your body is maintaining your blood sugar, mostly it's running high, and let's say it's at 14 millimole. Now, when your blood sugar falls down to 9, for you, that is hypoglycemia, but by definition, it's not. So you're gonna keep complaining that I'm not feeling well, I'm feeling dizzy, off, or jittery, and cranky. It affects the mood really bad, and you feel like eating something. You check your blood sugar, it's already high. Then you kind of like become more nervous. Should I really eat that my blood sugar is already high? I haven't eaten for so many hours. Why my blood sugar is high? So this frustration also releases the same hormone, cortisol. Stress may be of any type, but it releases cortisol. And this is, you have to keep this point in mind. So cortisol increases our blood sugar level, and stress and there's a strong relation between stress and diabetes. Female who actually work and they deal with a lot of work stress, they are more prone to have type 2 diabetes. Even if the stress is perceived, it's not a physical stress or a real stress. Some people are in a habit of just being worrying all the time. A lot of females actually have that. And I have studied that in depth, but I'm not going to go in detail at this time. That perceived stress, how we are able to deal with the stress or how much we worry, is very much treatable. And it is also related to certain micronutrient deficiencies, which could be a number of them, but it is treatable, and we must look into that as well if we want to manage our diabetes without pharmaceutical medications. When we are stressed, body release cortisol, which is produced from the suprarenal glands. And look at that, its effect on pancreas. It causes hypertrophy of beta pancreatic cells. It causes hyperplasia of pancreatic beta cell. It causes hyperglycemia. It works on the GLUT4 translocation decreases the glucose uptake inside the muscles. So the body cannot really burn that glucose, and instead it's causing more insulin release. It causing more effect on pancreatic cell. So eventually, when more insulin is produced and glucose is not being utilized because body is reserving it, lipogenesis is increased. So we're going to gain more fat, going to be more insulin resistant. And this particular stress, do you think metformin is going to do anything to that, or insulin, or any other hypoglycemic agents? No, nothing is going to work. We have to manage, we have to understand and treat these things at ourselves. And we have to remember cortisol is not just it's not a simple, it's a life-saving hormone. And we must be thankful for it to be produced in our body every single day. But too much of it is not good. So we're going to add cortisol to our flowchart. And this is how the total thing looked like so far, that all the factors, the 5 main factors which causes insulin resistance, and that resistance have many manifestation in the form of metabolic syndrome and its other complications. So by now, after this much understanding, do you think the calories in versus calories out is the same acceptable model of gaining weight? And can we guide our patient on the same basis? Can we tell them, go ahead and lose weight, eat less, you're gaining weight because you're eating too much? Many of them will swear that they are not eating that much, but they are not able to lose weight despite working out every single day. And I know that because I'm not lying, I was one of them. So now that we understand the problem, let's look at the solution. Stay with me, okay? Don't sleep. We know that these were the 5 factors, and this is how our body responded to different type of proteins, different type of foods. So our target is to reduce insulin. So first thing we learned that simple carbohydrates increase the blood sugar more than complex carbohydrates, right? So what we're gonna do, we're gonna switch to complex carbohydrates and take out all the refined carbohydrates. This is a simple visual thing. Simple carbohydrates on the right hand side, complex on the left, which is basically anything which God has created the way it is created is complex carbohydrate, because it has far more than just carbohydrate. It has other micronutrients and particularly fiber in them, and that make a huge difference. Simple carbohydrate, refined, are basically just all-purpose flour. And all-purpose flour particularly have a compound which is called alloxin added to it in the form of as an anti-caking agent. So its shelf life is improved and it looks very beautiful white color. It's nice and fluffy flowing, but at a cost of destroying our beta cells. So anything which is made from all-purpose flour, which is in Urdu known as maida, should not be eaten by anyone, whether you're diabetic or not. These are the major difference, as I mentioned, fiber. And the other point I want to mention is the glycemic index. So fiber, micronutrients, and the glycemic index is the difference between simple and complex carbs. Simple carbs tend to have higher glycemic index. Complex have lower glycemic index. So if you are eating one slice of bread, which let's say have 15 grams of carbohydrate, versus if you eat a meal made with vegetables and total amount of carbohydrate is the same, 15, your blood sugar is going to be totally different. It's not going to be as high when you eat a complex carb meal versus anything made with simple carb. This glycemic index, I'm sure all of you are familiar. If not, you can read here, is widely used and advised to our patients. And we say, avoid the high glycemic index food and switch to the low one, because then your blood sugar is not going to go that high. It is true, but is it the ultimate truth? I do not agree with it, and I will explain why. And I will explain I think this is not going to be possible today. So I'm just going to explain a summary of it, but in part 2, we will go into further detail why glycemic index is not really the solution for it and why patients are complaining about it all the time. The reason is a lot of low glycemic index food, which are also complex carbohydrate, but many people may be reacting to them. They may have sensitivity to those food. Food sensitivity is one of the major overlooked cause in diabetes and in many other diseases, including arthritis, migraines, and many other chronic issues. It's not just about the health, the gut. I think people who react to food right away, like they really have an allergy, like peanut allergy, they're the lucky one. Or those who have oxalate food allergies, they're the lucky one because their body, their gut guides them right away. They ate food, they kind of figure out very quickly that every time I eat this particular food, my stomach becomes upset or I get this particular type of reaction. But those people who are not reacting, but they are sensitive, they are still producing autoantibodies against those food. And now, because their symptoms are not so clear, they are the unlucky one. It goes on, they think they don't have any issue, and they go on like that. And to some extent, this was part of my story as well. So, okay, the glycemic index, so far we are using it. So how can we reduce it? The number of food that we eat becomes very limited depending on high or low glycemic index food. List is really huge. If you're interested, you can Google and find it out if you're not familiar. But can we actually reduce the glycemic index of any food? Let's look at that. There are so many factors that affect glycemic index. First thing is glycemic index is developed in the lab by checking one food at a time. But in reality, we don't do that. We eat a meal, mixed meal. We are using so many other things together. So glycemic index already become kind of obsolete there. Then the food processing also affected. If we have finely ground flour versus something which is more whole, it's going to have a different glycemic index. For example, instant oats will have a higher glycemic index versus steel cut oats. If we cook something too much, so now the proteins are already broken down, it's partially digested in a way, it's going to have more higher glycemic index. It's going to raise blood sugar more quickly than the one which is not that much cooked. So that also, in fact, I have given an example of pasta here. The type of acidity also matter. So if a food is too much alkaline versus if it has some acidity to it, or that also help with the glycemic index. Vinegar and sour, for example, sourdough bread actually is a good example. It has lower glycemic index as compared to the wheat. They are both made with the same flour, but the processing makes a difference. The fermentation make it a little bit more acidic. And that's the same case with vinegar. That's why it helps. Then there are external factors. It's not always about the food. How we are feeling, what is the level of stress, what is the time of the day when we ate that food, everything matters. Did we exercise? The type of exercise we did. Did we have a good night's sleep? All those things matter. And above all, fiber also matter, and we will go in further detail about that in a minute. So antidote to carbohydrate is fiber, because every time you add fiber to your diet or any carbohydrate meal which has fiber in it, that works as an antidote. Literally, it brings down the glycemic index, it brings down the blood sugar. There was this very nice Nurses Health Study 1 and 2. You should look it up and read. Information is given here. It actually looked at people who are eating more processed food. So just the effect of processing the food or the processed food, the risk of the effect of food was bringing more glycemic load. Blood sugar was going higher up. Similarly, in another study which was related to the same health professional study, in this follow-up, they found the effect of processing actually more than doubled it. It was 2.17 as compared to 1 in other people. So, and they looked at the cereal fiber intake. The less fiber, the higher the glycemic response and the risk of diabetes. So when it comes to glycemic response, what happens when we have fiber in it, it slows down the absorption of that nutrient, and blood sugar slowly rises. Particularly, as mentioned in this study, the guar and the pectin, they are the most effective one because they are gelatinous type of fiber. They are soluble fiber. They bind to the food and they release them slowly from the stomach. So obviously, it helps with the satiety. It helps with the bulk formation, but it also helps with colonic fermentation, and it slows down the absorption. So blood sugar will be slowly rising, not spiking, because every time it spikes, it brings more insulin, and that's not good, right? Fiber also helps with protein. So not just carbohydrate, but even when we take it with protein, it can bring down the glycemic response, and it's helpful. And here is the conclusion of it, that how it modulates the rate at which different food are digested in our GI tract. In the long term, in this particular study, it also helped with the coronary heart disease, which is one of the problem with diabetics. Most diabetic die with cardiovascular diseases as compared to their diabetes. Long-term fiber intake also help to prevent cholecystectomy. Like I previously mentioned, it is related. All those people who have this bile issue, their bile become very sludgy, thick, and then it is stagnant there and it forms the bile stones. Most of them are cholesterol bile stone, because cholesterol is the precursor for bile, right? So, but unfortunately, due to the lack of clear understanding, we try to focus to reduce the cholesterol instead of helping it out. And when the cholesterol, the bile is more thick and it can't come out, or it's making a sand or stone, and that causes pain, because every time gallbladder constrict and there is a stone, it's going to cause a lot of pain. So we end up having cholecystectomies. We take out gallbladder as if it's not, it's of no use, it's extra organ. But that is not true, and we can save it. We'll just talk about it in further detail, inshallah, in next webinars. So let's look at the guar gum. This is a soluble type of polysaccharide, and it's really, really helpful, as helpful as cholestyramine. As the physicians, many of you already are familiar with cholestyramine. We use it as a bile absorber, right? So we can have the same effect by using guar gum. And I must mention that guar gum is not the same guar gum. I will guide you which type of guar gum in a minute. You may be thinking it's the thickener that we use in the soup. No, it's not. So fiber is fabulous. Different things have different amount of fiber. Here are some good one, most healthy one. I will seriously suggest to start using flaxseed, and if not, psyllium husk and chia seed as well. So we added fiber to our flow chart here as the solution. And another way to reduce the glycemic index is very interesting. This particular study found out that any type we eat the same amount of carbohydrate, particularly higher glycemic index food, for example, a white bread slice, which has a glycemic index of almost 100 most of the time. It's above 70, that's high glycemic index. But if we add vinegar to it, that will make a little bit acidity, right? It reduces the glycemic index. So when glycemic index is low, less amount of insulin is being produced, less blood sugar spike is there, and overall results are much better. So for a better diabetic control, vinegar is very promising. Even at bedtime, if you take that, your morning blood sugar level can be controlled in a much better way. Here is a meta-analysis which looked at the vinegar, and they found it's very helpful even to reduce postprandial glucose. So I usually suggest to take, remember the golden rule of 1/3. When you're going to take the water, I suggest mix 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar, which should be raw and with mother, which means it should have a sediment in it, and mix 2 tablespoons in a glass of water. Add anything else like a little bit of salt, pink Himalayan salt, maybe a little bit cayenne pepper, or the fiber that you're going to take with the meal, right? So add some the guarcum based fiber, the sun, it's called sun fiber, or psyllium husk, which is in Urdu called ispagol. Mix that in and drink that water before the meal, and then eat whatever you need to eat. You will definitely eat less because you already have the water in, and your blood sugar control will be far more better. You will start losing weight. Initially, you will stop gaining weight. Over time, you will start losing weight as well, because now body is normalizing itself without caloric restriction. You're not giving up on food. You are only going to eat nutrient rich food, which is very important. That's why I'm guiding you about eliminating refined carbohydrates versus going and eating the more other nutrient rich food. And use of vinegar is a sunnah as well. And make sure that you make that intention for maximum benefit. So we added vinegar here as well. High fructose, we know it causes more blood sugar and it's present in all these products, so we just have to avoid them. But fructose is also present in many fruits. So should we avoid that too? No, they are nutrient rich. I think we should just avoid taking their juice because it's going to spike. It has a lot of blood sugar, which is easily absorbable now. There is no fiber now. So instead of orange juice, if we just eat orange, and instead of drinking orange juice, which took 3 to 4 oranges to make 1 glass of juice, if we ate just 1 orange at a time, that should be fine. It's giving you a lot of nutrition, and there is fiber, so blood sugar is not going to spike. So portion size is important at one time. Artificial sweetener are very popular, and we must look at this thing as well. Many people ask about it. Artificial sweetener affect our gut microbiota. They do not agree. People who actually can feel it, they are lucky one again. It affects our microbiome, and it causes um, dysbiosis in the gut, which has a lot of impact on our health. Many of you are already familiar. Those who do not, who are not familiar, please read around it and avoid artificial sweeteners. So if you're not taking artificial sweetener, the question comes, should we eat the regular sugar? What do you think? It's a very common problem, and sadly enough, it's been asked by so many physicians as well. So that makes me wonder, are we not really understanding what is sugar in our mind? We have some information about biochemistry, if not all. So please remember, any type of carbohydrate that we eat is going to get converted. When it's digested, it is converting into sugar. It is making glucose. So eating a roti is no more different than having 1 teaspoon of sugar. Maybe even actually the bread may have more sugar to it. So if you can eat those snacks made with carbohydrate, even if they are salty biscuit, which is very popular among diabetic because they are avoiding the sugar, not realizing that, heck, it's not just about the sugar, it's not about the taste, it's about the amount of carbohydrate, it's about the type of carbohydrate and how much we take at one time, and is there any fiber to it? Are we getting what is required to digest those carbohydrates? Remember, I mentioned that thiamine is so important in each and every step of diabetes carbohydrate metabolism. So if we are eating those refined carbohydrate, avoiding sugar, and still wondering why we are having diabetic complication, why are we fatigued, why things are not working, think about it again. Realize there is no thiamine in any man-made thing, and that includes pretty much all sweet biscuits as well, right? And the bread, and no matter what type of bread, the wheat breads or and its byproducts. So portion size is very important, particularly when you're eating protein. People tend to eat a lot more. Remember, anything which is outside your palm size or a size of a card of deck of cards, it is more than you need at one time. Just stick with that. If your hand is large, you have a higher big palm, good for you. But every individual is different. It's proportionate to your need. So it's a general rule that you can easily follow. By default, um, any food that you eat, whether it's raw or cooked, do not eat more than 20 grams of carbohydrate at one time. Now, are you going to calculate them? Ideally, you will, or if I usually even have a list of these things. But rough rule is 2/3 of a cup is enough at one time of cooked food or whatever you're eating. You do not need more than that. So portion size is very important depending on the type of food you're eating. And we're going to add that to our list here. Let's talk a little bit about stress again. You remember about the cortisol. Cortisol also increases gluconeogenesis. So it is its purpose. That's how it functions. It increases the glucose level in the blood and it inhibits the effect of insulin. So when this happens, it stops this transport of glucose into the cell, which is the same as insulin resistance, right? And it has a diurnal variation. Whether you stress out or not, we do need cortisol in the morning time so we can get up and get going. But we do not need all the time. But if we are stressed out, this type of diurnal effect, which should be higher in the morning and lower in the evening, it can get disturbed. Many people do have a lab test for it and they check it and they find that their evening cholesterol level is high or their morning cortisol level that is more commonly checked is low. This means that you need to work on your adrenal. Your adrenal fatigue is setting in, and we need to reverse that thing so that we are not tired and we are energetic during the day and we can sleep through the night. And your blood sugar should not spike. But stress is something which is not related to the diurnal effect of release of cortisol. Stress releases cortisol all the time. So the curve is pretty much like higher up all day long rather than having a morning rise. So what happens? It has a physiological, psychological, behavioral, and environmental factors associated with this. Whatever is the factor in your life, only you can find it out, and you have to work on that. You have to become more mindful about these things because these are the things which increases cortisol level, and it affects everyone. And you can look at these studies here how important it is even for patient in chemotherapy. So mindfulness is a very golden key to life. Whatever you do, even if you're eating or sleeping or listening right now, for example, we're sitting here spending our time together. It should be very mindful. It should have an intention. It should have a goal. And those are the things which will keep you grounded and peaceful. I think it's also a good time to just talk a little bit about Somachi's effect and dawn phenomena. These are the common problem, as many of you already are familiar with it. In Somachi's effect, when we sleep at night time, patient may experience like a silent hypoglycemia. They didn't know their blood sugar went down. And when they, as a result, body secretes more cortisol in the body. So when they wake up in the morning, the blood sugar is high. I learned something after applying the CGM. I learned that when I'm lying down in bed, when I wake up, my blood sugar is fine. So if I, let's say, woke up at 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock, it's nice and fine within the range. The moment I step out of the bed, my blood sugar starts going up. That's how quickly it goes up. I open up the blinds and the blood sugar goes up. So something is stimulated with the light that releases the cortisol, which is good, right? Then as soon as if I slept late and I woke up late, now I'm waking up at 10 in the morning or 11 in the morning, what do you expect? Blood sugar is going to be high anyway, because that's how the body's mechanism work. And that is how my blood sugar levels were showing up again and again. So then I realized that people who are just not able to sleep at night, or it's not a restful sleep, and then they wake up and check their blood sugar, or they are trying to help themselves by eating something, and then they check their blood sugar and then they become worried, my fasting is high. And my answer is again and again the same. Don't worry, look for the factors. If it's high, it's not going to harm as much as a low blood sugar is harmful, which was usually happening when you were asleep during the night time. So what do you think where the solution should be? How should we fix it? Sorry. Should we increase the dose for the morning? Should we increase the night dose of insulin? Or should we simply advise the patient, hey, have a mindful snack before bedtime? Maybe your glycine is too low, because glycine, as we learn, is usually low in diabetic because they are B6 deficient. Maybe we should add B6 to their treatment. Maybe we should tell them, eat a complex snack, not refined carbohydrate, but complex with some fat. Maybe have a teaspoon of olive oil at night time. So it maintains your blood sugar. And maybe put them on glycine and then see how it affects. Maybe help them with a good night's sleep. And it's going to fix the problem automatically rather than increasing their night dose of insulin. I'm sorry, it really makes me angry because I have been through all these things and the memories are really bad. Okay, so another thing I want to talk about is the role of growth hormone. You know, growth hormone is produced early in the morning. That's how it is. And it's an anabolic hormone. So all the people with the dawn phenomena, let's not forget about the growth hormone. And first fix these things. Maybe, I think there is a reverse, it causes a reverse inhibition. So as when glucose level is, sorry, the growth hormone is deficient, as it is in many people, the blood sugar actually starts going up because it increases the insulin resistance or something. I'm sorry, I'm not clear about this thing at this time. Need a little bit more understanding, or maybe I'm just a little bit tired now. So this was the overall flow chart that we made so far. So I hope this will help you. You can print it out. You can put it on your inside the cupboard of your kitchen and have a look at these factors every time you're going to eat. No matter what you're dealing with, I have found them extremely helpful for myself and for the limited number of people that I have worked with. All of them are benefiting from it very obviously. They are easily able to lower their doses of oral or injectable glycemic agents. Many of them have stopped taking insulin altogether because now they were dealing with hypoglycemia all the time. So it's not that now you need to eat up more so you're not having a hypoglycemia. You actually need to decrease the dose of insulin and get off it, because it's anabolic, is causing more problem than any solution. You are still dealing with the complications anyway. I'm not familiar with any patient who is on insulin dependent and they had a good glycemic control, but they never had any diabetic complication. If you know, please do tell me, because I would love to learn more about that. So we talked about the fat. Let's look at the type of fat. Fats and fiber are very important, so I'm going to spend a chunk of time on those things, and hopefully that will answer all the questions in your mind, or even those that you don't have. Fats are good to sustain your blood sugar and energy. They keep you less hungry as well. There are different type of fats. One of them is PUFA fats, and those are the one which actually make better difference as compared to monounsaturated. The polyunsaturated ones are the one. Polyunsaturated fats, as you can see here in a review, they help with, they improve the glycemia, they decrease insulin resistance, and the insulin capacity as well. They PUFAs are the key, and they are usually present in um, the fiber containing seeds like flaxseed. They also decrease abdominal obesity, which is one of the problem with many diabetic. They have a big belly and their limbs become small. Their limbs shrink. They have a dystrophy of their lower legs, but their tummy will always be little bit or too much protruding. So PUFAs also help with abdominal obesity. They also are rich in omega-3, as you are familiar with it. So these are the type of food which has a lot of polyunsaturated fatty acids or PUFAs: fish oil, flaxseed oil, hemp oil, soybean oil. But when you are taking soybean oil, please avoid the GMO variety, which is the 99.9% in the market. You have to literally be very cautious and find non-GMO soybean. Healthy fat, further option I have mentioned here. I'm going to go a little bit more detail about this. Fish oil particularly also help with insulin resistance, but when you're picking up the fish oil, make sure you actually know the brand well, make sure it's authentic, it's a reliable source, and ideally it should be in the liquid form, not in the capsule form. Those of you who have been with me, I'm sure they understand the reason. Those who don't know, let me just simplify it. Our body guides us. Anytime we eat a food, there is a smell to it. Sometimes it's not good and we don't eat that food. Even if we try to put that, like we are eating an almond, we did not really figure out that it has gone bad. We put it in the mouth, we chew, and now our taste bud guide us. Don't eat it. It doesn't taste good. So we spit it out. Even if we swallow it down, our body make us vomit it. But if we are taking fish oil, all these sensory guidance that our body was offering at different level, it's no more usable, right? We just swallowed a capsule. It's going to take time to release in the stomach. And that oil, if it's oxygenized, it is very harmful than any good. So do not take fish oil capsule. Instead, rely on a good brand. It should taste nice, and it should have a lot of good nutrients, including vitamin A, D, and omega-3s. And liquid is better. Flaxseed, you gotta learn about that. A lot of information is there in the group. You gotta learn how to prepare it before you use it. Otherwise, you will end up having more phytates. Do not wash them. You have to dry roast them. You can read the details in the group. Flaxseed also provide fiber, and it has many lignans, which are very helpful, especially for females, especially for pre and postmenopausal females, or anyone who is dealing with a lot of chronic back pain, for example, or are high in estrogen. There is a big role of estrogen, and we have to manage that both in male and in females. I mean, it is a female hormone, but even in males, it's important. We'll talk about it later sometime, but just remember that adding flaxseed is important, but what type of, the timing is also important, that when do you add it. So ideally add it with your food, or if you're taking a snack, make sure, you add some fiber to it too. So flaxseed also decrease the bad cholesterol, apparently the LDL, low density cholesterol. It also helps with hypertension. So make sure when you're taking these things and now your blood sugar along with your blood sugar, your blood pressure also start to decrease, especially if you're taking magnesium with it. It will fall down, inshallah. So when it's decreasing, it does not mean you stop taking these foods which are helping you. You should decrease the amount of medication you're taking, okay? Unfortunately, a lot of government websites and even reliable sources like Mayo Hospital, they have this thing written on their website that when your blood sugar or when your blood pressure falls by consuming magnesium, stop the magnesium, increase the dose of your blood pressure medications, which is stupid, right? Okay, among the fats, olive oil is the king of all. It's also sunnah. It helps with insulin resistance. It helps with also with weight loss. And it's a really good idea to have 1 teaspoon, even if it's a small teaspoon, of a good cold pressed extra virgin olive oil. I must tell you one important thing about here. One of the patient who had a lot of GI issue and she was not able to tolerate any type of fats. Her gallbladder was really a mess, and we were just when we started working, we spoke about this olive oil. So she spent a good amount of fortune into finding a very expensive bottle of olive oil, which was cold pressed extra virgin, and she was able to tolerate it just fine. It did not bother her at all, no reactions. And she was not diabetic, but she had more of gallbladder issue. So this was very interesting that a good oil does not cause the same effect as the other oils do. Also, the medium chain triglyceride, they also help with insulin resistance, and they are present in coconut oil. So one good idea is to switch to coconut oil to prepare your meals, or at least have some form of coconut on daily basis. Avocado, which is not a vegetable but a fruit, it's also have an oil available, and that's also a good choice. It also helps to reduce insulin resistance, and it improves the HDL, so our lipid profile also improve. Avocado has some monounsaturated fats, not just PUFAs. It has that too. And it's also, studies have shown that it improves the methylation metabolic syndrome as well. It helps. So what about the butter? Do you think it's a healthy thing? I think the important thing is to first figure out where the butter is coming from. Is it made from the milk from the cows, which are grass fed in their natural habitat, or they are tied up and grain fed? Because, if your diet is not normal, your milk is going to contain the same type of harmful ingredients that's coming from your diet, which is a GMO corn, unfortunately, in this scenario. Number two, all the toxins in the body are stored mostly inside the fat. It's true for animals too. Milk has fat in it. You all know it. So if you're taking it butter or the milk, which has that fat from the grain-fed cows, you are consuming a concentrate of those toxins when you are taking that butter. So that's one important point I wanted to point out. Additionally, this is a very interesting study. Unfortunately, I forgot to write down the PMID here. This study looked at the glycemic effect of butter and compared it with different other foods, like here you can see with soy and other foods. So it has pretty much the same effect as soy. Olive oil has much better glycemic response rate. In terms of insulin, butter was actually causing more insulin release as compared to other foods. And when they measured the HOMA scale for insulin resistance, which as physicians you should be familiar with, as patient you don't need to know about it. So I'm not talking about it today. For HOMA score, the butter was pretty high, but if look at the olive oil, it's pretty low. So butter may not be a good idea, especially if it's not from grass-fed cows. Maybe because it still has some proteins in it. But if we take that out and make it a clarified ghee, then it can be a better suitable. And studies do show that it's more useful even for IBS people because it has butyrates in it, and it has a good quality ghee is really good from grass-fed cows butter, because it has vitamin A, E, K, all the fat-soluble vitamin, plus it also have riboflavin. And that's the yellow color. Riboflavin is yellow, and it makes it's really helpful to have that. It's really important for diabetics as well as for diabetic complications. And we will talk about it in maybe stage 2 or stage 3 of part 2 or 3 of this series. But it's very important. It's ghee also is better for cooking as compared to butter due to its smoke point, higher smoke point. It's also good for health and gut and IBS due to butyrates, and it promotes a good type of microbiome too. And then people are afraid that it's going to raise their cholesterol. They are afraid of fat anyway. And this study has looked at the ghee, particularly clarified butter, and they found that after taking, it's a small one just for 4 weeks, but they found that there was not much difference and it did not cause any dyslipidemia. Fiber, the most important thing, as you know, anytime we eat non-fibrous food, which are easily digestible, which in other words, we call them as refined carbohydrates, they cause a glucose spike and then a glucose crash follows, and insulin resistance develops, and then comes all the problem, right? So let's look at the studies. Fiber actually delays the gastric emptying, and that's the way it helps diabetics to maintain a good glucose level. In general, remember, fiber has a color. It's never white in color in the nature. So any type of food which is white in color, for example, if you're eating white flour, it does not have any fiber in it. If you're eating white rice, there is no fiber to it. Fiber was naturally present in the food, but we have taken it out. And unfortunately, we are purely eating the starchy carbohydrate, the middle part, which is the endosperm in most of the cases. That's a long story. You can read about it at EBNM, or maybe sometime later we'll talk about it. And remember the thiamine, how diabetics are deficient in it, and it causes the cardiovascular diseases and all those things. Thiamine is actually present in the fiber. So when we took it out of our diet by eating white flour and white rice, and have all those other factors that we earlier discussed, like cooking in the tap water, etc., then thiamine, is there a surprise that we become thiamine deficient? Oh, just 1 second. Okay. So impact of dietary fiber is very important also for detoxification. It's literally like a trash can. You can like sweep the floor, but if you don't have a can to pick it up, it's not going to go out. It's going to spread again. And that's the case of fiber inside our body. It's important for phase 2 detoxification. It helps, it binds with the toxins and eliminates them. It also forms a mucin layer on the gastric mucosa, on our GI mucosa. This is so important. Look at this study, beautifully done. The people who were eating fiber-rich diet, they have a good mucin barrier to protect them from any pathogenic bacteria. Those who do not, they are prone to have those pathogenic opportunistic infections, causing damage to the cell, releasing the zonulins, and thus causing the leaky gut. Very nice study. I loved it, loved reading it. And I suggest that all of you look it up and read it. So just remember, fiber is not just for all the previously discussed benefits. It's also a prebiotic. It helps. In this study, you will realize the good type of bacteria, they grow when there is fiber. The bad type of bacteria grow when there is no fiber. So it is a prebiotic too. And many of the fiber are being used as a prebiotic. And it's in certain cases, it becomes important to go in a sequential way. If they are not able to utilize not able to digest fiber, and they are having GI symptom every time they eat fiber, then you first have to work on that. Once they are able to digest it, then you have to add the good type of fiber in it. And you have to make sure the timing and the dose, you gradually increase it. It's a long process. It may take a couple of months or more. I don't know. Every case is different. But you cannot just tell the people to go ahead and eat more fiber, and as if that's going to solve their any of the issues. No, we have to understand every step, and then we guide them. Fiber intake may help with diabetes in some, sorry, with constipation due to the bulk formation, but it doesn't help everyone. And I'm sure all of you have experienced this thing to some extent, that fiber and the water may not be the answer to all the constipations all the time. And there is a reason behind it. We will talk about it most likely in the second part. Fibers are different types, soluble and insoluble, and it's important that we understand that is what type of fiber is better for us. So insoluble fiber is mostly present in psyllium husk as well, but guar gum is soluble fiber. And this is where the major difference is. Psyllium husk will form more bulk, but guar gum fiber, which is known as sun fiber, this is a better prebiotic. It's a soluble fiber. It's going to solve more than one problem. I'm not against psyllium husk. I love it, use it every single day. But there is, and it helps with type 2 diabetics. It decreases hypercholesterolemia too. But at the same time, for better results, with certain type of food, like if I'm eating things which are going to increase blood sugar, refined carbohydrate, like I feel like having ice cream or something, then I rely on fiber heavily. But with other type of food, in general, I do not eat wheat, so my bread has a lot of psyllium husk in it. But my pre-meal water that I drink with apple cider vinegar, that has a soluble fiber in the form of sun fiber. Okay, so the psyllium husk is really important, and it reduces the risk of metabolic syndrome. It improves our lipid profile, and moderately high cholesterol can be actually just with dietary modification and addition of fiber can be decreased. It has a lot of benefit, decreases the bad cholesterol too within 6 months without needing any medication. I have done it with many patients now. Well, number is not that high, but whatever I dealt with, results were always the same. So I can say it with confidence, it is going to help. Timing really matters. So remember this thing. It's not like you can have, you will have some benefit if you take it any time of the day, like early in the morning or before bedtime, etc. Because it is still going to form the bulk. But if you want to have maximum benefit, you should take it with the meal so that it binds with some of the macronutrients. It slows down their release. So there is more time for body to digest those things. There is more time for body to absorb the nutrients from them. There are people who eat and they rush to the bathroom right away. That's called dumping syndrome. And many times these are the people, if they right away they're rushing to the bathroom, what time body has to absorb any nutrition? Are they even digesting or absorbing anything, or is they're just in a they're just thinking they're eating and getting the nutrition? It becomes important to deal with this thing, and adding fiber, the type of fiber they are able to digest, that's important. If they're not, you first have to work on that. So combine it with the food for the maximum benefit. This is what I absolutely love. I want to mention, this is not the guar gum that is used for soup as a soup thickener. That is different. This is a partially hydrolyzed, and it has its own benefit. Works both well for constipation and diarrhea. Excellent for IBS people, even for children, because it's insoluble. Sorry, it's invisible. It's so much soluble, it does not have any taste. So even if you mix it in water and give it to a kid, they will not know that there was anything in this water. You can easily mix it in any food. I put it on my ice cream because that's something I love to eat. I use non-dairy ice cream. I have shared previously how eating a whole quart of it does not really increase any blood sugar because I was taking all the precautionary measures which I have shared with you so far. So guar gum is really helpful. What you need to look for is that it should be partially hydrolyzed guar gum. It is, if it's not partially hydrolyzed, it is not going to work. And you may need to start it with a very, very tiny dose, but take it every day and gradually increase it. So these are the key points that so far we discussed. I don't know if I should continue. I think it's been getting it's getting late. So please tell me, I have a few things, or should we put that on to the next time? Hello?
Sorry, I'll have to leave now. It's 10:30 at night here and I haven't had dinner yet, so I can't carry on.
Okay.
I don't know what the other thing.
Thank you. Yes, I understand. It's a really long topic.
Actually,
Yeah. No, I think we will do it next time, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. Can continue it later on because it is.
Yes, I understand. So Feroz, is it okay?
It
We
was an
really
excellent
enjoyed
topic.
it and it was very useful for us, and we would like to continue it. But this time is quite late for us.
It is. And I'm tired too. Unfortunately, the topic is really, really vast, and I want to give out the information which can actually help just by listening to one thing rather than leaving you with a lot of questions.
No, I mean, it's been a really comprehensive presentation. I've learnt loads, and I think it would be a really good opportunity to digest it and then maybe schedule another one. We'll put the recording into the group, the evidence-based nutrition. If you're not already in the group, I'd let myself or Rahat know, and we'll add you or invite you. But inshallah, we can schedule another one.
Okay.
Fairly soon, and I hope everybody's benefited. And I really want to thank you, Rahat, because I know you've taken so much time and effort to actually put all the slides together, and they were really, really informative. So Jazakallah khair.
Thank you very much, Rahat. Thank you.
Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah
We
khair.
really enjoyed.
Jazakallah.
Thank you so much.
There's one thing I want to mention. You're very welcome, and thank you for joining me. Music is nothing without the audience. The one thing I want to mention that this is such an important point, and since Ramadan al-Mubarak is coming up soon, inshallah, by the things that we discussed, you can benefit maximum benefits out of the fasting by trying the same things during Ramadan. And also because I may not be able to talk as much during Ramadan. I can even talk on fairly short notice at any time. That's fine with me. But let's just, at least basics, let's just finish that before Ramadan. And those people who are interested in understanding the mechanism, I can just like scroll down the screen and you can see there are like maybe 400 or 500 more slides still remaining there, particularly all about the treatment of complications of diabetes. It's a very common question, but it will take time. So those who want to join me later, you're more than welcome. We will be doing a study. We'll run a study group, and we are still under a process of organizing those. Show me your interest. Let me know that you want to join, and only then I may work on these things more.
Yeah.
Oh, inshallah, I'll love to join.
Yeah. Okay, really good.
Thank you very much, of course, for organizing this. Allah Hafiz.
Thank you very much, Feroz, for arranging it. Thank you. Allah
No
Hafiz.
problem at all. Thank you so much. So I'm just going to end the meeting and end the recording, okay?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Allah Hafiz.
Hafiz. Allah Hafiz.